Hello and welcome to the podcast for the Week 6 games. Tonight I'm joined by Fui. How you going, mate?
Sorry. I was just adjusting my glove. We weren't doing anything important, were we?
Adjusting your glove. Okay, we'll find out about that later on. And also Blackie has joined us. How you going, mate?
Hello, my friends. Very well.
Sadly, we've had to send a search party out for Brasher, so we'll find out what's going on there. Fui, I gather that you're in some pain, mate. What's up with that?
I would actually say I was in some pain, but I've got another announcement. I do like to announce things at the start of podcast, don't I? It's a medical miracle, a world first. I have actually removed the entire past 7 days from my memory. So
very good. Yes. So when you hurt your back, which pick six was it?
It was the second one, yes.
All right, we might leave that game and come back to it later on. And Blackie, of course, note that the only two that have shown up for the podcast this week couldn't have been bothered turning up last week. Blackie, you get to celebrate another win as well, yeah?
First of many, so we'll pace ourselves.
It's the Drew Lock phenomenon, yeah?
Youngest ever quarterback to win at Foxborough, so yep.
Really? Jeez, someone knows his stats.
Outside of Brady.
Is that a real stat, or did you just make that up?
Yeah, no, he's the youngest quarterback from an away team to win at Foxborough.
Don't know how long Foxborough's been around. I'll have to find that out. That's a good stat. See, Philly, that's called.
It might be during the Bill era, but that's enough history for me. That's a good enough stat.
It is a pretty good stat. I mean, when you think about it, how old is he?
23, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty young for a starting quarterback. So I would say that's legit all time.
He's 23.
So there was no Thursday night football in Week 6, of course, which was in and of itself both a blessing in disguise. I'm sure Aussie Dude would have been really happy not to have to watch what he described as another shitfest. But all it really meant was that the Thursday night game was moved to Sunday, and so we still had to put up with it. Bengals Colts, because Fui, I know you're a big fan of the old Joe Burrow machine. Are you finally accepting that maybe Joey Boy's not quite Hall of Fame material?
It's just a little speed hump in the road. All young quarterbacks are bound to have their ups and downs, their ebbs and flows, and he's doing more than enough. They're probably going to have 5 or 6 wins by the end of the year.
Wow, that should set them on pace.
That's lofty ambition.
For the Bengals, that is.
They might have 5 wins.
What is this, the 8th worst division in football that you're aiming for?
It would win.
That would win the NFC.
Exactly, yeah. No, look, he's going okay. I mean, you're putting him on behind one of the worst lines. You're putting him pairing with one of the worst defenses going around. It's going to be a struggle this year. We know this, so there's no stress from me. I'm fully confident in Joe's abilities.
I am not the quarterback whisperer, but I lay a lot of the blame at the feet of the turnstiles that he sets up behind. It's one of the worst lines going around, even worse than the Eagles, I reckon.
That's a pretty big call.
I was going to say, yeah, just watch that insulting the other teams. All right, they might get upset. That's a pretty low bar. Look, I'm also a bit interested, and it's a shame that it hasn't had much attention. The Jets are obviously dominating all the attention in the press at the moment about coaching, but I've been considering his reputation and what he came to the NFL as supposedly delivering, I've been really surprised at how poor Zach Taylor's coaching has been, and I don't get a sense that he's got any kind of connection. A number of the younger players, and I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're both saying about the fact their offensive line's not great, but by the same token, and particularly this week, Burrow actually had quite a number of weapons. He had Joe Mixon. You got AJ Green. You got a number of not Hall of Fame level talents, but still really quite decent talents there on offense, and they just don't seem to be able to use them productively.
I think he might be as well. I was kind of in on him being comeback player of the year, but I think he's done. But if you ask AJ Green, he just wants to be traded because they're not using him. So
I think T. Higgins is a legitimate talent.
Yep.
As a wide receiver, but I think Joe Mix's struggles can be laid at the feet of the coaching staff for underutilising him. He should be getting 60 plus receptions possessions per year, and they're continue to run in between the tackles instead of being creative with them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's not like I don't necessarily expect everybody to have the brilliant schemes that Dougie Boy Peterson has, like Philly Special or whatever. But I just haven't seen any kind of a coordinated approach to develop a solid game plan that's taking advantage of the talent. Like the mob on the other side of the field. Conversely, the Colt, they've had Marlon Mack go down. They've had some real serious injuries, and yet the way that they've used their remaining offensive weapons, especially at running back, has been really creative. Every week they come out with a different approach or a different play pattern, and it doesn't always work, but at least they're trying it.
Yeah. Two things there though. Number one, I mean we're definitely not at Gase/Darnold type levels of ruined yet, so it's only new. Number two, the Colts invested heavily in the offensive line, and I think that makes a hell of a difference.
True. What were you going to say, Blake?
Thirdly, I think Jonathan Taylor could potentially even be more talented than Joe Mixon, so I don't think there's much of a knock on the Colts running back. And Hines is a very good pass catcher, third down back. I think they've actually got a pretty good running back stable.
Definitely.
So yeah, the other thing that because it was 2 weeks ago, everybody was talking about how good the Colts defense was. Last week, oh my God, they're a horrible defense. They couldn't stop water. And then this week, they actually looked like they held up pretty well. So for me, that's for the next few games. I'll be really interested to see how the Colts hold up. I think
they've had a few injuries.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it going. When they're at their peak, they're a very, very good defense. But
I think Darius Leonard's a pretty massive barometer for them.
Yes, yeah, very much. A bit like Von Miller used to be for the Broncos, right?
And now we've got 6 or 7 guys,
none of whom show up. I think probably the other game, we won't talk Broncos Patriots just yet. The other game that was more entertaining than expected for me anyway was the Texans-Titans game. Not necessarily perfect football. I mean, let's face it, anytime you have 78 points scored in a game, it's probably not perfect football. But it real contrast in coaching between old man Romeo and his sideline package of medical equipment and Mr. Vrabel and the young Titans staff. And I thought the Titans did a really good job of just hanging in there, and taking advantage of what they were given. Did you think that the Texans would play as well as they did offensively, Blackie? Did you think that was going to be something that we'd see as soon as Bill O'Brien was gone?
Well, they had a win last week, didn't they, off the back of Bob no longer being there. So I don't think it's much of a surprise. I think it's been interesting to see the rumours come out this week that all their wide receivers are on the trade table. I think they're trying to recoup some picks that they've previously pissed away on, let's be honest, slightly above average talent in Tunsil. I think they've got a long road ahead of them. I actually am pretty jealous of the Dolphins. I think given they have their first and second rounder, that's going to lay some pretty good foundations around Tua. I think it'll be a case where if he's not the guy moving forward, it's not because he didn't have the supporting.
Yeah, and they can certainly build the Dolphins can really use those text pick to effectively get some extra bonus high talent. What do you reckon, Fui? You watched the game at all, or was this another one that was a bit of a tea-towel game that you skipped?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a tea-towel game, but I kind of just went through the highlights a little bit. I'm actually a little bit worried because we've got the Texans this week, and with the Packers defense, I think they might score more than 36 points, to be honest. I was worried that the sleeping giant might wake up because, look, Watson is a winner, and I think it was pretty obvious they were being held back, and I think everyone knows they were being held back by O'Brien. So the shackles are off. They've got nothing to lose, and I think they're going to play with a lot of freedom over the next 12 weeks, and could cause some surprises. Yeah, it could be a similar thing happening in Atlanta as well.
Yeah, it's amazing how a change in coaching staff can sometimes be a bit of a spark. You wonder how much of that is an adverse reflection on the old coach and how much of it's an endorsement of the new bloke. We saw that in AFL where it looked like Reece Shaw had really last year had given North Melbourne a bit of a bounce and was going to be a great coach. But it was probably more a fact that it just wasn't Brad Scott,
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And O'Brien had, it was clear he had lost the players. So, yeah, the early change was a good one for them.
I think the other thing that stood out to me, and be interested in your views on this, Blackie, but the other game at almost the same time was Lions Jaguars, and what that brought back to me while I was watching the two games was when the Lions were shortlisting their coaches, they shortlisted it down to a choice between Patricia and Vrabel, and of course they went with Patricia. And part of me understands that decision because Matt Patricia was a much more experienced assistant coach. I think Vrabel had only been out of football as a player for maybe 2 years or 3 years, so you could sort of understand the decision on the face of it. But now, when you look back 3 years down the track, between the Titans and the Lions, there's no doubt who's the better coach and who's really developed his team better, yeah?
Oh, I think Patricia was touted as the defensive genius, but it's been amazing to see the leads that they've given up. I don't know whether that's because he's conservative or he goes to prevent or they just stop playing hard enough or it's execution. I really don't know. But I'd be surprised if he's there next year. It would take a pretty massive turnaround.
And the Jaguars put in another stinker of a performance to actually give Patricia some hope that he might keep his job. The Jaguars, again, the Jets getting all the negative coverage at the moment, but geez, the Jags are a shit show, aren't they? Considering they were in the AFC Championship game like 2 years ago, I guess.
I see. Well, no one cares about them when they're winning, so no one's going to care about them when they're losing either, I don't think so. But they are under the radar.
I think they're pretty bereft of talent. I think part of their problem for this year is that they picked up who I think is going to be a pretty good cornerback in head draft, but cornerbacks, unless they're freaks, take a little time to get up to NFL speed. So I'd be surprised if they weren't picking high again this year.
Chanot's not been a bad pickup either at wide receiver. He's been very impressive for a rookie wide receiver. I can't say his name properly, no doubt. GG will correct me. That's it. Well done. I'm glad we've got one classy person that can do the pronunciation.
I just like hearing you say it wrong all the time.
Yeah, I think they made two good picks in the first two rounds. I think they're moving in the right direction, but they have a lot of holes and they've had a lot of guys leave. I'd be surprised if their cap situation wasn't really, really, really good. They traded Ronnie Harrison to the Browns. Telvin Smith's gone crazy. Miles Jack is going to have a short career.
Is Minshew the answer?
After the first game, I thought, you know what the thing is? I strongly suspect that if they finish high enough to pick up a Fields or a Lawrence, that they will do it, irrespective of whether Minshew's the answer, because they need to face the franchise. And I suspect that Khan's main motivation is potentially not winning a Super Bowl, that it might be trying to make money off the team or package it so it's got enough support behind it to be able to move to London.
Yeah, I think move to London's the thing because he owns Fulham over in the English, or I guess we're actually in the Premier League this year, which is a bit of a surprise. But that and his play for Fulham wasn't actually about owning a soccer team. It was all about the land and trying to get approval for a new sports stadium. So having an NFL team, even if it was only part of the year in London, would be a big commercial play for him, which is I think what he's actually driving. And I feel for the Jaguars supporters. I've never met one, but it must be awful to be the fan of a team like that, where you're constantly having to worry about them relocating, not like the Bills or the Browns, but relocating to another country that you're going to need a passport to go watch them.
I've got to be honest, a lot of supporters in the US moving to a different state would be similar to moving to a different country.
Moving from one electorate to another is like moving to a different country. Forget about moving states, mate. The Browns, American Crow was all up and about how fabulous they were going to be, and they went to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh handed them their ass through a drinking straw, to the point where I believe American Crow stopped watching 3 minutes into the game, or perhaps it was 5 minutes in, or something like that. Was it just me, or did Odell Beckham not take losing well?
Does he ever? Even when he's on good teams, he's still a bit of a diva, so... Yeah, no, he's not. The guy's not right. Let's be honest. So there's something missing from him, I think. So, but what that is, I don't know.
Blackie?
I would be surprised if they weren't sneakily trying to get rid of him because they're a run-first team now. He isn't going to get the touches that he wants. He's probably still got some trade value. I would be pretty surprised if they're not trying to shop him. Yeah,
well, quarterback whisperer Fui, we've been going back and forth about whether Mayfield's the real deal. He got put on the bench in the third quarter. That's how bad he was. Is it a bit like, as with the Packers, a bit like time to look for a new quarterback?
Yeah, I don't want to say yes, but I do. If I was head of analytics, I'd probably be letting this one play out for a little bit longer. But he's definitely stagnated, and if you're not seeing any improvements over the next couple of months, then you definitely have to bring in some competition, I think.
Blackie, the Steelers off to a 5-0 start for the year. I think it's the first time since the late 70s. Is Tomlin a really good coach, or are the Browns just shit?
I actually think their positional coaches must be really good because they consistently produce very good defensive linemen and very good wide receivers. Or their scouts are brilliant in that department. I mean, the amount of pressure they're getting at the moment from the D line is really, really good, and it comes across the internal Hayward to it, and then on the outside with Dupree, Watt. I think they'll probably be hurting a little bit after losing Devin Bush, but they're another team that's constantly topping up through the draft. In the last two drafts, they've got Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, who look like they'll be set and forget receivers for them for the next 10 years, and that's even without Juju, who I think will move on to browner pastures.
Ooh, what do you mean by that?
Well, shittier team, but he'll chase money, so I'm thinking the Jets.
Now that would work. I'd love to see that.
I actually thought you meant he was going to the Cleveland Browns. I thought you were being really shifty there.
I'm not that smart, mate. Come on.
Now, harking back to last week's podcast, which both of you bailed on because your team were on bye weeks and you couldn't be bothered watching other teams play. Last week we had two Viking on as guests to fill in for you two gobblers, and both Sven and Shuttlesworth were very scared about facing the Falcon, the Dan Quinn-less Falcon. And of course, it's almost like they both had looking glasses or predictive that they'd been to see the tarot lady or whatever, because that's exactly how it played out. What did you think, Fui? Is it one of those things where it was just the Vikings' bad luck to play a fired-up Falcon?
Or are the Vikings just shit?
Well, it was their fifth home game in a row that they've lost.
Yeah, Vikings fans know the Vikings, and the Vikings fans know what to expect in this situation, and Viking fans got exactly as they expected in this situation. A little bit of bad luck that, coming off a Dan Quinn firing, but yeah, even if Dan Quinn didn't get fired, I think they probably would have lost, to be honest, because that's what the Vikings do.
Now, Blackie, I know you're a big fan of Justin Jefferson. He had a pretty damn good game.
Oh, did he ever? He is looking very, 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 very good. I thought he was going to be a good pro, but he's exceeded my wildest consideration. It's been incredible. I think on their defensive side, though, obviously Ngakwe's being traded to the Ravens, reportedly. But outside of that, I think all you need to look at as a takeaway for what's going on with their defense is Xavier Rhodes was one of the worst cornerbacks in the league last year, has gone across the Colt and is putting up very, very, very good numbers over there as a lockdown corner. So I think they've got pretty serious issues. I think Daniel Hunter is going to be a big in for them, but the horse has already bolted this year.
Yeah, and I think the defense coaching's been questioned. And it's funny because both Sven and Shuttlesworth were saying that Zimmer's a pretty solid defensive coach, whereas for me, I think that's been their weak spot. Certainly when we blew them away in Philly in that playoff game, the defense was just never turned up, and it was bad coaching. It wasn't that they didn't have good, talented players. But just on Jefferson, he had 9 passes, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's an amazing day for a rookie. And
more than Laquan Treadwell ever had in his whole career.
And I think the bit that burns with me for that is that, of course, the Eagles took Rager and not Jefferson. But anyway.
At least he took a receiver, okay? Shut up.
Oh, Jordan Love might still get a chance to play this year, the way things are going.
Just on Xavier Rhodes, while we're still talking, completion rate allowed 2019, 80%. 2020, 41.4. 83% completion rating. We could put the Nugget Man out there with his hands tied behind his back, and he would be giving away less than 80, no doubt.
I'm glad someone has faith in you, Fui. I'm not so sure, but yes, I get what you're saying, Blackie. And again, you got to wonder how much of that is coaching, because I'm just not convinced. I said on the podcast last week, I'm not convinced that Zimmer has grown as a coach. I haven't seen him doing very much different Whereas you look at, and I mentioned Vrabel before, certainly Andy Reid in Kansas City, all the really good coaches, you look at them and they're growing and changing. So it doesn't always work, but they're at least trying different things. It's not just the same old, same old.
But isn't Zimmer's son now the defensive coordinator?
Yeah. And I personally think, apart from being the definition of nepotism, I also just think it's so much like what's happened in Dallas, where McCarthy's brought Mike Nolan, who was his mentor and gave him his first coaching job. 10, 15 years later, McCarthy repays the favor by hiring him as a defensive coordinator. But the guy's been out of the game for 10 years. And it's exactly the same if you hire somebody that's never worked in the game. Your son or not, they're not going to know the schemes. They're not going to know how to coach players. And you got to wonder, I mean, if you're somebody like Xavier Rhodes that's got a bit of ability, and the guy in the coaching room that's giving you the messages is the senior coach's son, does that affect how you view him? Do you take the messages seriously?
I think I kind of have the same feeling when you get coaches come from the college ranks up to the professional. You get that same kind of feeling where it's, these guys are used to talking to kids, and but talking to someone older than them or getting a message from someone younger, whichever way you want to look at it, it probably doesn't have the same effect.
I've been putting off talking about it because it pains me a little bit to say it, but I know you're champing at the bit to talk about it. Blackie, the Brandon McManus game, every point scored by the kicker kind of sums up the Drew Lock offense at the moment, doesn't it?
I wouldn't be blaming Drew Lock for that. He had 2 absolute mint passes dropped in the end zone. I think he actually played a pretty good game, and even PFF was saying that he was his completion rate and his low yards weren't really on him. And I would say at least one of the picks was quite bad at the end, but a lot of that's on play calling. I think I don't think you take much away from that game. No Fant, no Sutton, no Hamler. Judy still finding his feet. Albert O's first game. It'll be interesting to see how they go against Kansas City this week in what's supposed to be a blizzard. Brad Chubb's pretty good player though.
Yeah, he's really quite good. Philly, what did you think?
I'm not a big fan of winning or losing by field goals. I think it's a joke of a game, to be honest. Score a touchdown, fuckers. It's not that hard.
Even if it's you throwing to the cornerback.
That's right.
Yeah, so what you're saying is Rodgers' pick six were better than Rodgers kicking field goals. Great, okay.
I have more respect for that win. It's not, you don't win games that way. It just feels wrong, if you ask me. Maybe it is just me, I don't know, but yeah, it just doesn't feel right.
So it's like Darryl Kerrigan
up and about.
Just wouldn't fill me with any confidence.
What was that, Blackie?
I said the quarterback whisperer is up and about.
Yes.
Doesn't like special team. The bloke who's had Favre.
Yeah, but didn't draft a wide receiver this year, so obviously not a believer in wide receivers.
So I'd just like to third the love for Bradley Chubb as well. So just he's coming along, and obviously after the injury, he's getting back into it now, showing what he can do.
I wasn't sold on him pre-draft.
Why not?
Because he had a bad 3-cone, and I thought that would potentially limit his ceiling. Because I don't got.
Hang on. You're saying what? Like he was having trouble squashing it in the bong or something? The 3-cone?
Yeah. Look, and his predecessor in Von Miller definitely didn't have any issues in that respect. But I think there's been limited edge rushers who have no bend, and he was a really, really technically sound edge rusher. And I think they've got limited upside because you can coach technique, but you can't coach speed and bend. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of guys like Vernon Golson who had all the athletic talent in the world but never got a sack in the NFL because they had zero technique and bad coaching. But yeah, I thought he was a pretty low. I actually thought he was probably a 4-3 end rather than a 3-4 outside linebacker. But where he's actually impressed me is he's actually very good at setting the edge. I think he'll be a good player for a very long time. So pretty happy with him right now. I thought he might struggle without Von, but no, he's been good.
And it's not just Von you're missing. Jarrell Casey's obviously out for the year too. So, it was an impressive performance against a pretty reasonable team. Certainly a team that has a decent offensive line in the Patriots. I thought it was a really interesting, and it tells me that people are, for all of Belichick's brilliance, people are adjusting to the Cam Newton-driven game plan, because you could see that the Broncos' defensive plan was basically to throw extra pressure on each edge of the line to stop Newton running as much as he normally does. And as soon as Cam Newton has to throw the ball, it's a totally different proposition, you know. And I think that was probably, I'm not a massive Patriots watcher, but that's as bad as I've ever seen them play offensively. They were super, super disjointed in a home game. I've seen them play worse when they've been away, but not at home. But the other thing for me from that game, which didn't get a lot of attention in the media, was Philip Lindsay. I thought he was, yet again, just when he's fit, he's one of the better, more reliable running backs, 100-yard plus game. Just keeps churning them out,
Yeah, I think that's
bit of
interesting because go for it, Pooh.
I just thought it was a bit of a slap in the face to bring in Ingram, if you ask me. So, but anyway, yeah.
I think what was interesting for me on the Lindsay one was caught 0 passes, where I kind of view him as potentially a bit of a hybrid scat back, but he was pure runner. And I think we're 7-0 when he rushes for 100 yards. But I think his over-under on Sportsbet was like 48 yards. So I actually bet all over that because I was like, there's no chance he's going under that. So that was an easy collect.
The Bears against the Panthers was a strange game. Probably pretty appropriate as one of the early slate of games. It's fair to say that Bridgewater's had a lot of love and a lot of support, especially last week with some Vikings fans. It's fair to say most of the Vikings fans seem to wish that he was still the quarterback at Minnesota instead of their $95 billion player Cousins. But for all the good things that Teddy had done in the previous 2 or 3 weeks, I thought that game against the Bears was really disappointing, and it just puts all kinds of question marks about whether Bridgewater's got a future as a number 1 starter in the NFL. And to be fair, the other thing that was, because I'm a big skeptic on whether Nick Foles is really a frontline quarterback, and finally Matt Nagy seems to have adjusted because they moved to a much heavier run game than they had been, and I think that worked much better for them. And I think the offensive line did a better job of supporting the run game than they have. Still not great. They've still got a long way to go, but you didn't just see Foles throwing like a headless chook, desperately hoping to connect on a pass. It was a much more balanced game. What do you think, Fu?
I think in terms of Bridgewater and Foles, and I kind of include Minshew in this kind of area too. I think they're all quarterbacks that kind of high floor, low ceiling. They're only going to take you so far. Yeah, I think Bridgewater being out of the game, for however long he was, absolutely great effort to get back, no doubt. But he's only ever going to be a bridge quarterback, as Foles is only ever going to be a bridge quarterback as well. So I don't think you can ask too much of them, and I think that's what you're seeing from both teams. And as you said, they'll both have to rely on the run game to be good teams, short term and long term, I think. But yeah, it kind of was. Just to me, it was just a game. I don't think anything really stood out about it.
So we know that Fui didn't bother watching the game. Blackie, did you catch the highlights or have any views?
Absolutely. It makes me realise how few of the Bears' offensive line I actually know. I think Whitehair's probably the only one that I could name off the top of my head. So, but it's probably credit to them because if they were stinking out massively, you probably would know their name. I think on the defensive side, they've actually got a few pieces in there that are seriously A-grade players. Roquan Smith, Mac, obviously, Akeem Hicks is really good, and Jackson. It's not surprising me that they're thereabout, but they lack quite a bit of identity on the offensive side. I think Allen Robinson's an absolute superstar, but they're probably outside of him don't have a lot to throw to.
Yeah, and the Bears look like they might possibly, I think they're 5-1 for the first time since 2012. I think 2012 or 2013, something like that. Might possibly actually be a good team. It's fair to say that of all the teams that have good records, they're the ones that everybody keeps throwing stones at, saying, the Bears, they're not really that good. But they just keep winning, so we'll have to see.
I still think they're somewhat fraudulent, but look, they're obviously got some talented players, but there's question marks at quarterback and coach.
I like that. Somewhat fraudulent.
You can use that.
Yeah. On you, Drongo. Probably the other game that, was in that early slot that really represented in a nutshell the 2020 season so far and the bizarreness that it brings. It comes to you, of course, from the 8th best division in football, as all good games are coming from this year, and that was the New York Giants against the football team. 1 point game, and it really came down to good old Riverboat Ron going for the 2 points instead of just kicking the point after and going to overtime. Do you think he got the decision right, Blackie?
No way. I don't know why they do that. It's indefensible. Like, you don't get that much kudos if you win it, unless they're tanked. That's my thought was that they're looking for a high pick, to be perfectly honest. They're looking at Justin Fields. That's my only thought. They've got a license to lose game from Schneider.
Fooey, is Schneider giving them licenses to lose as opposed to molest the cheerleaders? Or is it really the case that Riverboat Ron's innate tendency to gamble kind of backfired, just like your betting tips?
Yeah, definitely. Rivera's not really known for his gambling ways, is he? To me, he's a pretty straightforward guy, and it seems a bit out of character not to just go for the tie and overtime. So maybe Blackie's onto something.
No, that can't be possible. That never happens. Blackie's never onto anything except really bad dinner. Do we want to talk about the other game in the early slot from the 8th best division in football?
Pass.
Which one's that? Was there a team playing?
Eagles Ravens.
It was close, wasn't it? Were you worried at any point that you might win?
No, there was no chance of us winning.
The one thing I will do is double down on my Lamar Jackson doubt.
In all seriousness, that was one thing that stood out to me. Was our defensive front four put as strong a pressure on Jackson as just about anybody has this year, and it showed. He looked really rattled. And bear in mind that our cornerbacks are in the worst two sets of backfields in the league, so it's not like there was excellent coverage downfield or anything. But even moderate pressure was enough to make him kind of unsettled. So I think Blackie's onto something. And some of us have been saying it for a while that Jackson's not really convincing when he can't run around and do his preferred approach. What do you reckon, Phil?
Yeah, he's definitely has to add another string to that bow. You can't be a one-trick pony in this league, and as some running quarterbacks find out, you do get found out, and yeah, it's up to him to work on his deficiencies.
So another game you didn't watch. Good call.
Did you get my my glove reference?
No,
you didn't. Did you get it?
Unless you're talking about OJ.
No, not at all. Did you get it, Blackie?
No, talk to me.
Oh, guys, where have you been? On one play, I don't know what quarter or whatever, but you just recently released a tackle. I think it was Jamon Brown or something like that.
Yes.
So on one play, you see him block someone to the ground. Wentz is still running around for his life, and he stops to fix his glove on his hand. Did you not see that? Look it up.
I didn't see that.
It's just amazing. And he fixes his glove, and then he starts looking around for someone else to block. I'm like, what? This is why you are where you are.
No wonder we cut him.
Exactly. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. That's why obviously my joke fell flat earlier, and that was why, because you guys haven't seen that.
I'll have to track that little bit of footage down, and we'll put it in the podcast thread so everyone can share it. I mean, he had a bad day. He had a really bad day. But he's not the only one on the offensive line to be pretty poor. It was an interesting. I will say that it was the first time all year that Wentz in the long passing looked like he was getting his mojo back in terms of the accuracy of his throws. He's been wildly off all year, and that game in week 6 was really the first time that he was at least getting some really good throws in in difficult downfield position. And I think that's important. He's got to get his confidence back if he's going to become.
What do you think of Fulgham?
Oh, he's got an excellent surname. I think he's one of the players that probably benefited from not being hyped and taken in the draft. I suspect. So from my point of view, we hype, say, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and he's going to be fabulous and he's going to be wonderful. And in 3 years, he's done just nothing. Total waste of a second-round pick. Whereas Fulgham didn't get anything like the level of hype, has kind of had to fight for spots on practice squad. And in his 3rd year, he's finally actually developed a bit of maturity and showing things. Some players just need that. They need to, gradually grow. And I do think, especially with both Jalen Rager and Deshaun Jackson out, nobody's challenging Fulgham. We saw that in the Thursday game from Week 7. He's very much playing a prominent role for the Eagles, and I think if your fantasy football league still has him on the free agency list, go get him because he'll be racking up the points. I suspect. Not that the Eagles are necessarily going to score a huge amount, but he'll get a lot of targets and he'll have quite a lot of receptions.
They will be coming from behind a lot.
Absolutely. And the other thing that really works in his favour is that they just don't have a slot receiver anymore, the Eagles. That they don't have one of those receivers that can, do that kind of role that they come in and they'll get 10 or 15 targets every single game for, like 6 or 8 yards a catch. That we just don't have somebody like that. And so as a result, he's much more, and particularly with Zach Ertz down, Zach Ertz is on IR for the next 3 weeks at least. There's just nobody else to throw to, And you just hope he doesn't drop the ball, because one thing that'll turn the Eagles fans hard against you is if you drop the ball a lot, and that happened with Nelson Aguilar, who just quietly is playing brilliantly over in Las Vegas.
I was going to say not done too badly.
And then I guess we moved on to what's probably going to be one of the most remarkable games. And no, Fui, I'm not yet talking about the Rogers Festival is excellent. One of the most remarkable games potentially in the 2020 season, and also in the history books, at least for the Dolphins franchise, because they came out, and yes, it was only the Jet, but it was Adam Gase, and they all have chips on their shoulders about him still. So they came out and they played brilliantly, and I thought Fitzmagic put himself in a really, really strong position for the 3rd week in a row. Didn't set a foot wrong, and we saw Tua come out and take the last 2 snaps, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's great. He'll, a bit of good practice when the game was a blowout." And of course, it turns out that's Fitzmagic's last game as a starter for the Dolphins. So, what do you think, Blackie? Was it a strange decision given how well he played?
Tua is an Aaron Donald cuddle away from not playing for the rest of the year. I think, to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me if they are thinking, shit, Houston's stinking it up. We're probably winning a few too many games. We need to find out what we've got in Tua to figure out if we need to double the quarterback here. Make sure he's sturdy enough. That would be my 2 cents, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. No one was putting pressure on them.
No, and he was playing pretty damn well. Fitzmagic is one of those, everybody that's followed the NFL for any time in the last 27 years, well, Fitzmagic's been playing for 37 different teams, knows that he has those games where he'll throw 12 interceptions in 3 minutes. But when he's on, he's a phenomenal quarterback, and I just don't understand why, when you've got him in that form, why you'd dump him, What do you reckon, Fui?
I was actually, it's funny you bring this up, but I was speaking to my Dolphins supporting mate earlier tonight about this exact thing, and he doesn't understand it, and he follows the team extremely closely. I guess the main reasons that I've seen that are being touted, pressure from ownership. Why would there be pressure from ownership right now? It's not to sell seats because there's no one going to the games. So, yeah, I personally don't understand it either. And what Blackie said is what I said to my mate earlier, is like, I think you're winning a few too many games. Still want to, there's still a few holes to plug with some quality picks, and I think that was the main driver, and potentially Fitzpatrick was going to win a bit much. I thought they did it perfectly in this game. Just give him a couple of series, every week if that's what you want to do. But I don't see how it benefits anyone, Fitzpatrick sitting on the bench and Tua playing. So yeah, and especially this week against Donald. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more in the preview section of next week's games, but I will say that, and it's not a surprise. He's one of the least dramatic quarterbacks in the league, but heart goes out to Fitzpatrick for how crushing that must have been to have. You're right at the peak and you're playing with a growing team for a coach that seems like a really good coach that everybody is enjoying playing for, and you get benched and you've done nothing wrong.
So,
but he's been really positive about it, and he hasn't had the sads or cracked the shits or done a Sam Bradford and said trade me. He's been very mature about it.
Yeah, I've never really liked Fitzpatrick as a player, but he started to grow on me the last few weeks. I've been reading, when he's always been very accommodating and helpful to Tua, and he's in the interview saying, he's going to replace me one day. I'm going to do whatever I can to help him out now, so he's ready for that day. And then just all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from underneath him, within a week or two. It's kind of harsh.
It's like they took him at his word and they said, "Oh, you reckon? All right, okay, cool." Blackie, a real straightforward question from the cheap seats down here in the Turkey podcast. Has the Dolphin defense shown much improvement? And I'm thinking here particularly of Ogba. Or is it more that the Jets are just a bunch of sad, sorry sacks coached by Gase?
Yeah, they'll need a few more runs on the board. Yeah, I'm not convinced at all. I think they've got a few decent players. Wilkins, Howard, I think Jones is pretty good. But yeah, they've got a ways to go. I think I would be surprised if, unless Tua is a basket case, that both their first round picks in the upcoming draft aren't used on defensive talent.
Yeah, they've got a fair bit of week. All right, we've put it off for long enough. We've talked about the kickers game. We even talked about that game with the travesty of the 8th best division in football. It has come time to talk about what will become known as the Pick 6 game. Fui, how'd you get through, mate? How did you make it through?
The first time or the second time? Because I didn't make it through the first time. I was sitting at work and I'm like, no, I'm not watching this shit right now. I came back to it later and it wasn't any better, unfortunately.
So to Karen in Westmount Heidelberg, when you open your package and it doesn't have spark plugs in it, it has a dead cat. We apologise. Yeah. Blackie, did you feel for Fui at all, or were you rolling around on the floor laughing like I was?
I actually wasn't laughing at all. I was quietly praying for a third one.
Even though Rodgers is your starting quarterback in BFFFFL and his crappy performance meant you lost, yeah?
I would take 0 wins for the rest of my BFFFL career if it meant Fui tasting a bit of humility.
I am
Aaron
such
Rodgers
a humble
interception.
guy.
Well, yeah, that's debatable. But Aaron Rodgers getting intercepted is not going to make him any more humble, dude.
No, but Jordan Love coming in and being shit might.
True. But, I've got a theory and neither of you have picked up on it, so I'll just put it out there. You would have been really happy at quarter time, Fui, because you were up by 10, weren't you?
Yep, I was ecstatic. I thought it was one of the best starts of the game we've had in a fair while.
Yeah, well, you clearly missed the problem. The problem was Aaron McCringleberry. He trots out that stupid celebration, and I have to say, if you watch the replay, we'll put the little clip of it up in the thread. If you haven't seen it already, it's worth watching. If only not just because Aaron Rodgers gets it very true to life, shall we say, much as the Key and Peele skit had it, but as much as anything because Tim Boyle, who is the backup quarterback, runs the entire length of the sideline so that he can play the part of the referee in the skit staring at Rodgers' crotch to make sure there's not too many crotch thrusts. Now that's commitment when you're so committed as a backup quarterback that you run the length of the field just to participate in the celebration. It really is absolute commitment. And everything turned as soon as they did the McCringleberry. Shit got real.
It got very real. Well, I'm hoping it's just one of those games that you have. This week we'll find out.
Well, I think it's a bit more than just this week. I think, and again, maybe it's just my view, but I think that showed some, I don't want to get overly dramatic, but it showed some actual flaws in the Packers game. I'm not convinced, because, of course, the bit that gets lost in that is the reason Rodgers was celebrating was because it was him that went for the rushing touchdown. I'm not sure that the Packers have a hell of a lot of weapons there on offense. Am I being a bit negative?
I think you're being a little bit negative. I mean, we a lot of what we've been doing this year has revolved. Oh, maybe not a lot, but there's been quite a few times we've been either run the jet sweep or threatened to run the jet sweep. We did have Irvin out, who I think was a bigger loss than what we would expect. We're kind of a little bit banged up on the offensive line, and obviously the D isn't. They've given up 38 points, 32, whatever, in 3 quarters. So the defense isn't on, and the offense definitely was not on. Yeah, I think that there is talent on that offense. That talent is not what I'm worried about.
Really, Blackie?
Yeah.
Would you agree, given that Tampa Bay had almost as many rushing yards as Brady had passing yards, and that to me shows that the Bucs did a much better job of not relying on just their one superstar quarterback, whereas Green Bay was basically Rodgers and nothing else.
Yeah, I think certainly it exposes how much talent they've got. But yeah, anytime that Rojo's rolling on someone for 100 yards, there's alarm bells ringing. So I don't think it's exclusively any concern on the offense.
Yeah.
But Rodgers can
sorry.
make average players look like superstars. But you wonder where they'd be right now if they picked up one of the, if they picked up a Chase Claypool.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, like the Bucs were great, even in the first quarter against the run. They were stuffing Jones. They were always in the backfield. They were really good, and then that's a really good defense that we came up against. So I hope we learn. Hope is all.
Yeah, I will say that it's at least the third time this year that I've seen that defense tackle like they're covered in I don't know, some sort of oil or lubricant or something. They just slip and slide straight off the player. That Kareem Hunt touchdown run earlier in the year had about 27 missed tackles, and there was at least 3 plays where the Buccaneers player was tackled in pretty decent position behind the line of scrimmage, but they just fell off him, and then somebody else tackled him and they fell off him. Who's doing your tackle practice? Or are you just not doing it at all, Fui, because of COVID?
I don't think they're doing it at all. So yeah, but this has been my issue. The last few years, we just the fundamental part of the defense is tackling. That's basically where you should be making your money. Where we've got the splash plays, but the simple things we're just not doing.
One last point on that. Aaron McCringleberry is not the first person to do the McCringleberry celebration on an NFL field.
Von Miller.
A guy called Lance Moore from the New Orleans Saints did it back in 2013. But
I think quite a few guys have done it.
And where is he now?
He's not playing in the NFL, which is pretty much what's going to happen to Rodgers, if you ask me. But anyway, perhaps I'm slightly. It was a really, really odd game in that I think so. There were 2 pick sixes, and I think Rodgers has only thrown 3 in his whole career. And he's had at least one other one at Raymond James Stadium there in Florida. So Aussie dude, when he said last week that Rodgers doesn't play well in the sunny venues, he was a bit like the Vikings boys. He had it spot on. The dude knows his team. That's for sure.
Let's move on.
No. Let's talk about. Yeah, so Rodgers has only thrown 3 pick sixes in 16 years, 2 of them in the one game. Yeah, might be time to go, Aaron. So the last game that I thought was worth talking about was the one that everybody was because we won't touch on the 49ers win because Brasher's not here to gloat about it. The Bills Chiefs was being built up as quite a clash, and certainly was one I was probably looking forward to the most of all of the games of the week. Probably the first time in a while that Josh Allen hasn't necessarily looked all that composed under pressure. But also, I mean, I don't know what you thought, Blackie, but I didn't think the Chiefs were actually that dominant. I thought they were flawed in their own way.
I agree. Yeah, I think you called it early and said their defense is much worse than it was last season, and that's been pretty apparent. I don't know what it is. I don't think they've lost much. I think Chris Jones has been less impactful than he was. They've probably lost some depth. Frank Clark's being pretty average considering how much he's been getting paid. It probably just puts the onus more on Mahomes, but yeah, they're still loaded with talent and they'll be up there at the end of the season.
So, Fui, does Le'Veon Bell joining the Chiefs, does that give him another option in games like this where the other teams hanging around and trying to tough it out? Does it give him an alternate to just having Mahomes sling the ball around?
Do you need another option when you've got Edwards-Helaire running for 161 yards?
Who? Oh, you mean Edwards? Okay, yeah, him.
Yeah, my voice doesn't go that high. Sorry. I would try, but it's pretty embarrassing. Yeah, it's a scary thought, isn't it? What they could do and why they would do that at this point with Clyde doing as well as he is. Maybe they're expecting him to drop a bit, given it's his first NFL season, down the stretch, and Bell might pick up the slack. But it's a scary thought having them both in that team. And I guess the question is, will Bell regain his, league-leading kind of skill set and form
whereas Adam Gase ruined him forever. Yeah, I think the other thing for me that came out of that game was because the Bills have been talked up a lot because of their much improved defense. And for most of the season, that's been true. But I think this was the second week in a row that Matt Milano didn't play, and they just looked a few notches down on defense. They just didn't seem to have the same capacity to get real pressure on the quarterback that they had in previous week. Obviously, some of that is because the Chiefs have a really solid offensive line. But yeah, I'm not sure about that Broncos defense. It's a little shakier than I thought. Blackie, did you watch the 49ers game, Blackie?
No, I don't watch any 49ers games anymore.
It's not much fun.
Over. No, actually, I actually did. I thought Raheem Mostert was looking super good, but he's made of paper mache. I was super impressed with him. For a guy that was pretty much brought in specifically as someone who could run a 4.3, I think he's actually a very good runner, but he can't seem to get a good run at being on the park for very long.
Fui, does this game sum up the Rams in one easy game? They're the only team, or the first team possibly, to sweep the NFC East, which is their 4 win. But geez, they looked ordinary against the 49ers backup team, didn't they?
Yeah, do you think they just maybe kind of hear footsteps when the Niners are around? It's like they want to be the big boys, but when the actual big boys are around, they're just like go into their shell a bit. Okay, yes, they've only beaten the NFC East, but I guess wins are wins. Giants played them hard a few weeks ago. Yeah, and I think I said it when they played the Bills as well. It was going to be a statement game for one of those teams and end up being the Bills. So yeah, the Rams need to start proving just even to themselves that they're capable of winning the against the better teams. So yeah, time will tell.
So do I stick with Garoppolo in my fantasy team or not?
You know, I'm not a fan of Garoppolo, so you know this. So I would say if you've got a better option, I would go with it.
Yeah, well, I'm not going with Rodgers. I have to look into Jordan Love and see if I can get him off the waiver wire. So, anything else that stuck out at you from week 6 that you want to talk about, Philly?
No, as I said, mate, I've had the whole week erased from my mind.
Well, Blackie, I'll ask you, but, I'm a bit disappointed. You guys really haven't picked up on what was clearly the point of the week, and to be fair, it's not just you guys. Most of the other media gurus haven't picked up on it either. What this week did is prove yet again how true Chris Johnson was when he said that Adam Gase is an offensive genius. And there's all these people ganging up on Gase and saying what a bad coach he is, and they were shut out, and it's an atrocious offensive game. These people clearly don't get it. They clearly don't understand. Adam Gase is a revolutionary offensive coach. Yeah. He only had 4 first downs in the first half. I get it. But he punted 6 times in the first half. And his punter has now set the record for both the number and the length of punt ever in an NFL season. And we're only at week 6. He's reshaping what it means to play offense in the NFL. And it's all about the punters. You guys just don't get it. You just don't get it. He's cutting edge, the boy. Are you convinced, Blake?
I actually think he's, in all seriousness, one of the great defensive minds. I've never seen anyone shut down Le'Veon Bell like he did. Same with Donald.
He's just got a knack for it, doesn't he?
Tannehill, shut him down.
Devontae Parker.
Yeah, Robbie Anderson. It's been incredible. I think he's a defensive mastermind.
Yep.
All right, we might move on to preview week 7. Oh, hang on. One other thing, just to wrap up the week. 6th week of the season when someone's been down by 3 scores and come back to win. Massive trend of blown leads. And I guess I wouldn't mind knowing, because obviously it's something that you're both familiar with, what's your strategy for your teams once they get up by 3 touchdowns? Do you switch it off and go do some gardening or play on the PlayStation or whatever, knowing that when you switch it back on, they'll be down? What's the strategy, Blackie? How do you get through?
What the fuck are you talking about? My team hasn't been up by 3 touchdowns since before
1975. Lockdown. Yes. Okay. All right. Dumb question. Totally agree. Moving to the only winning member of the panel. How do you cope?
With expecting to lose, because I never expect to lose.
No, lose the lead, not necessarily lose the game.
Yeah. No, I think when you're up by 3 touchdowns, it gets pretty cruisy, and you kind of stop watching properly, and the opposition will score 1 touchdown. Like, it's only 1 touchdown. We're still two touchdowns ahead. Then they score another one, and kind of taking a bit more focus. And when they score a third one to even it up, that's when the chairs start flying. So I think it's the same with the players themselves. They just get a bit, what's the word? I've lost it already. They get a bit complacent. And it's very easy to get complacent when you're 3 touchdowns up.
And the last thing that we'll mention from week 6, which really, and we bagged the Jaguars out a little bit, but there was one really good thing. Certainly encouragement for people like Aldat and Licorice All Sorts, and even yourself, Fui, that still hold dreams of playing NFL. We all know that the Jaguars have had a bit of a rough year at kicker, and they're now on to their 4th different kicker. John Brown is his name, and he had a soccer background and had been used 4 times in college as a place kicker at kickoff. So that was his full stint was doing kickoffs at the beginnings of the plays. But that was it. Never kicked for field goal, never even in practice. So just imagine that, standing on the sideline with the helmet in your hand, and the guy says, coach comes up to you and goes, go kick a field goal. And you haven't done it in practice. You've never even practiced it for the team in practice. You put your helmet on, you run out, and you kick a field goal. That was pretty cool. Anyway, that was my moment of the week.
I mean, you've got to start somewhere. Might as well be in a professional game in front of millions on the TV.
Go 31 yards, and he put it straight down the middle.
Yeah, he needs practice.
Then he missed a 32-yarder, and he probably won't ever kick again. But anyway, I just thought it was a nice stat. So, Blackie, does that inspiring little stat allow you to finish on a high note and pretend that you might be on an NFL field one day?
No, that tidbit made me tired.
Oh, poor Blackie. All right, we'll be back soon with the start for the Week 7 preview.